You're about to join Don Neuen, co-host of Cowboy Logic Radio, and Denise Simon, host of the Denise Simon Experience, for a weekly situation report, or SITREP. 18 hours a day, Denise Simon lives her life as an Intel Analyst. 18 hours a day, Don Neuen lives his life in the world of rock and roll. 1 hour each day, Neuen receives a daily SITREP from Simon. Welcome to the Drive Time Situation Report. Fasten your seatbelt. You're now in Don Neuen's car, and he is calling in for his SITREP.
Smello.
What's up, Denise Simon? Ooh. Not a good sound to hear. Ladies and gentlemen, before we hear the before we hear that from Denise Simon, welcome to tonight's Drive Time Sit Rep. Now, for those of you that have been with us and our beloved listeners know what's going on and how this show operates, bear with me. I'm going to make a very brief description of what the new listeners are listening to. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Don Neuen. I'm the co-host of Cowboy Logic Radio, and I am in my car driving home after an extremely long day at the office. I've called into Denise Simon, who is gracious enough to update me on everything that I missed throughout the day. Now, for those of you that have been working all day, this is going to be very helpful. For those of you that have been sitting around reading documents, studying videos, carefully sifting through vetted material, this may be redundant, but I have a feeling that that's a very small segment of the population. Most of you guys do exactly what I did today. You got in your car early this morning, you drove into work, you worked all day, and you drove home, and you haven't had time to check anything. That's why the Drive Time Sit Rep is so important. So, Denise, by the way, on the other end of the confab here is the stellar Denise Simon, who has her own show that's called the Denise Simon Experience every Thursday night on whatever station or network you're listening to this show on. So without any further ado, Denise, Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas to you.
Thanks, Denise. Now, for those of you that are new to the show, Denise and I wish each other Merry Christmas every week, simply because from 2009 January until 2017 January, we had to wish each other Merry Christmas in
encrypted fashion.
That's right. That's right. Because the Obama administration didn't like us doing that. All right. Well, now, now we're making up for lost time, and we wish each other Merry Christmas every week of the year. So, something else that we do, ladies and gentlemen, is that we timestamp the show. You're going to know when this show was recorded, this conversation, and that way, when Denise impresses all of us with how far ahead of the curve she is, you actually know how far ahead of the curve she is. So, Denise, without any further ado, as only you can do after weeks and weeks and weeks and months and years of practice, let's timestamp the show.
Well, it's 8:57 p.m. on the 7th day of October in the year of our Lord, 2019.
I think you actually like doing that every week, don't you?
All right, whatever. One day is in this world, one day is the same as the last one.
Well, that's true, except it gets more and more bizarre. And thank God, and I do mean to thank God above, that we are able to say in the year of our Lord, 2019. Because if it wasn't for the year of our Lord, we'd be totally screwed, don't you think, Denise?
Yeah, at a minimum.
All right. So let's get after it in the immortal words of Quis Cuomo. I got a feeling we're going to talk about Syria. What do you think?
Well,
is that where you're going to go?
Sort of. I'm going to preface it all. You know how we're talking about, now 2 whistleblowers and how, the whistleblower's under threat and everybody wants to know who the whistleblower is, blah, 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 blah. I don't care about the whistleblower. I care about who leaked to the whistleblower. That means
Exactly.
Trump does not have control of his White House again. But it's now worse, Mr. Don. Because not only do we have a Ukraine call that obviously had the readout had to be public, but we now have a leak on the Erdogan call from Sunday night.
Oh, really?
Yes, really. It goes like this.
Not good. Hey,
Donald,
hold on before you read it. How is it that these leaks are not highly illegal?
they are. They're felonies.
Okay. So why is nobody getting charged?
Because Trump's not in control of his White House.
All right. So back to the Turkey leak.
Donald Trump got, quote, rolled by Turkish President Recep Erdogan, a National Security Council source with direct knowledge of the discussions told Newsweek. In a scheduled phone call on Sunday afternoon between Trump and Erdogan, Trump said he would withdraw U.S. forces from northern Syria. The phone call was scheduled after Turkey announced it was planning to invade Syria and hours after Erdogan reinforced his army units at the Syrian-Turkish border and issued his strongest threat to launch a military incursion, according to a National Security Council official to whom Newsweek spoke on the condition of anonymity. The U.S. withdrawal plays into the hands of the Islamic group, Damascus and Moscow, and the announcement left Trump's own Defense Department completely stunned, said Pentagon officials. Turkey, like the United States, wants the regime change in Syria. Russia and Iran support the Assad regime. Trump was definitely out-negotiated and only endorsed the troop withdrawal to make it look like we're getting something, but we're not getting something, the National Security Council source told Newsweek. The national security has entered a state of increased danger for decades to come because the president has no spine, and that's the bottom line, unquote. Newsweek granted the National Security Council official anonymity because they were not authorized to discuss the matter publicly. The source said it would not be surprising to see a Turkish incursion in the next 24 to 96 hours. Turkey has long considered the Kurdish militia in Syria to be a terrorist insurgency, despite the U.S. providing military and financial aid to the group in its fight against Islamic State. A battle with a vastly superior military of Turkey, a NATO ally, could drive the Kurds into the arms of Bashar al-Assad, the Syrian dictator that Washington once ousted, and by extension into an alliance with Russia and Iran, two U.S. rivals with forces in Syria. The White House said late Sunday evening in a statement that Turkey will soon invade northern Syria, but both the Defense Department and Trump on Twitter said they made clear to Turkey that they do not endorse a Turkish operation in northern Syria. Quote, as I have stated strongly before, and just to reiterate, if Turkey does anything that I, in my great and unmatched wisdom, consider to be off limits, I will totally destroy and obliterate the economy of Turkey. I've done before, said Trump on Twitter Monday. They must, with Europe and others, watch over the captured Islamic State fighters and families. It's time now for others in the region, some of great wealth, to protect their own territory, unquote. According to the National Security Council official who had firsthand knowledge of the phone call, Trump did not endorse any Turkish military operation against Kurdish forces, but also did not threaten economic sanctions during the phone call if Turkey decided to undertake the offensive operations.
All righty then. Where are we at with this? And should we apply the famous Dan Bongino rule. Need to give this 24 to 72 hours to see what the story is as opposed to a story.
I'll tell you what I would do right now. If I were Trump, I would call in Capitol Police. I would call in the security, Secret Service. I'd have them lock all the offices of all the doors of all the offices of everybody on his National Security Council, and tell them that, go, if you want to go operate, go over to Trump Tower or something, but you're not going to do it. I mean, Trump Hotel, but you're not going to do it here. And in order to have his White House Situation Room staffed, I would call on some people over at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, the American Enterprise Institute, or some of those at Heritage. Some of them actually still have their security clearances. And I would put them into a single space in the White House to operate. And I would clear his National Security Council completely. We don't really need right this second, I would say, the White House Situation Room, because the State Department has a clone of it that operates in Foggy Bottom. So that's how I would handle this thing right now. I'd start putting a threat. I mean, he needs to take control, and he doesn't have control. He hasn't had control. And furthermore, Turkey has already done some airstrikes and hit some Kurd outposts in Syria, so it's already happened. They have also moved in elite, what they call elite units and armored vehicles to the border towns with dozens of medics. And this would support the offensive that Turkey is about to do. However, because of the already airstrikes that Erdogan has already done, the USA says that they have shut down the northern Syria airspace to Turkey. Now, this is according to the Pentagon. How they do that, I do not know. But we have, in fact, expelled Turkey from the Joint Air Operations Center. Surveillance and reconnaissance data are not being shared with Ankara. Now, we have yet another little problem, and that is we have this land bridge that's already been established. And this land bridge has been moving lots of people and weapons. And Iran, North Korea, Pakistan, and Syria have been acquiring some of these weapons, and they've been redistributing some of these weapons in the context of proliferation by concealing the transport routes via third countries. So things have already gone sideways.
In less than 24 hours.
Yes.
Okay. Not supposed to have pregnant pauses like this.
I know. And I've been watching this all day long. And we have to also think of the burdens, because in two press conferences today, Trump said that we have only 50 troops over there that are, working with the PKK. That's false. We have about 1,000. And the PKK themselves, the Syrian Kurds, have lost about 11,000 people in this war. And those that are still there, we are with them. And we have somewhere in the 2,000 to 3,000 range of Islamic State fighters in detention. Now, we have made the Kurds so angry. All you have to do is look at their Twitter feed. We have made them so angry. What's going to be their decision for this betrayal? And therein lies the $64,000 question. Do they decide, okay, we're going to bail out and we're just going to roll in with Bashar al-Assad? Do they let all those Islamic State fighters go and just say, okay, Erdogan, Trump said that you have to deal with these Islamic State fighters, so deal with them. We're handing them over to you. Or come get them because we're opening up the gates. What kind of pressure is this now going to put on Israel to protect the Golan Heights, which butts up right against Syria?
How many Islamic State prisoners are we talking about?
I've heard various numbers. I've heard numbers from a couple of thousand to 10,000. I don't know what that number is. I mean, I've kind of poked around and I've seen numbers all over the place, so I don't want to guess. But we were kind of saying, okay, well, we've already removed most of our forces there. They've bailed out. Where they've gone, we don't necessarily know. They have maybe have rolled into Turkey, so they get on an airplane and leave. Some others are still there because we are still closing up shop, I guess, if you will, and some of them are going to roll in with the Kurds to make sure that they're safe. I mean, it's chaos. It's just chaos over there, especially now that there's been a set of sorties of airstrikes on Kurdish outposts.
All right, two questions come to mind. Number one, why do you believe that Trump did this now?
Campaign promise.
Two, I got you, but he didn't have to do that right this second.
My thought.
And number two, how did he get rolled by Erdogan other than what you just said with regard to the Kurds getting hit already?
Well, I mean, that shows that he got rolled, but I guess in the call they were necessarily referring to the fact that there was nothing in return. There wasn't some kind of a deal with Erdogan.
Gotcha.
I don't know.
I'm not real sure what kind of a deal there could have been with Turkey.
Well, I mean, look, we had been in these talks, feeble as they may be. We seem to have feeble talks when it comes to North Korea and the Taliban, but we were going to have some kind of a safe zone. What Erdogan wants to do is get rid of the 3 million Syrian refugees in his country. I clearly understand that. Nobody should be burdened with that. Lebanon's got a pile of them. Iraq's got a pile. But it wasn't all too long ago that he actually told Europe, hey, Europe, you better take these people back. These fighters back. And Europe has basically said no, which Trump did refer to. That Europe is not taking their citizens back. They don't want them. Okay, well, what are we supposed to do with them? Well, so many people don't know this, but Trump just signed a very large security deal with Siemens Corporation for Guantanamo that takes us into 2034, I think it is, 2034, 2039, almost into 2040. Okay, so bring them into Guantanamo and start charging these respective countries a fee so we don't have to, foot the bill for it. Okay, you're not going to take these people, your own people back, these fighters back. You're not going to deal with any kind of humanitarian costs. Well, all right, we'll take them. We're going to put them in Guantanamo, and we may have to build some other temporary places, and we're going to charge you for it. You don't have to deal with it. We'll deal with it, but you're going to pay for it. I mean, so, something's just very wrong in all of this. So whatever that safe zone necessarily was, that we were dealing with Turkey, that broke down. Now, why in the world he would deal with Turkey in the first place and not carry a hard line with Turkey, I don't know. Let's not forget, it was, 2 years ago when Erdogan and his thugs were in Washington, D.C., and they got into a big fight with the diplomatic security, right. And several people were beaten up and whatnot. And then what happens? We drop the charges. So, I mean, give me a break. Something is just very wrong here. I mean, what happened to this, restore law and order? Because that's not what I would call law and order.
Right. Well, not to mention a comment that Erdogan said a while back that I just won't forget. When asked the difference between, and I'm paraphrasing obviously, between radical Islam and Islam, Erdogan's answer and response was, Islam is Islam.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That one's always really troubled me.
Well, look, I'm not going to argue with any decisions that Trump has made on foreign policy. I mean, domestic policy. I will not argue with, the actions that he has taken when it comes to domestic policy. When it comes to foreign policy, I think some things have necessarily gone a little sideways. I mean, he sends out a tweet the other day congratulating China on their 74th birthday, when we know what China is doing to 2 million Uyghurs, what China is doing to Hong Kong, what China is doing to torpedo these trade deals. I'm sorry, I don't have the respect and regard for President Xi, and I don't think Trump should either. Then obviously we're not, the talks restarted again with North Korea, and that lasted about 10 minutes the end of last week. So the talks are off again.
Well, we've only got about 4 more minutes, and we're going to have to go to a break. Let's talk a little bit about North Korea, and why do you feel those talks are falling apart?
Well, I mean, how many missiles has the young boy launched here in the last couple of months,
Well, I get that. But why do you think he's doing this? To be so defiant of the potential? Because he's not
lifting any sanctions. And as long as little Kim says, we can advance, some deals here, but you're going to have to lift a sanction or two, Trump's not doing that. And that's fine. That's good.
Right.
But in the meantime, don't bother to talk to him anymore. Just crush him.
Yeah. So hit him harder with sanctions.
Yeah, I mean,
or are you suggesting any type of military action?
I would say some kinetic action. I would do some interesting cyber operations, maybe.
Right.
But we're done with this.
You mean put the country back into the dark age?
No, listen. The country is not operating, and the parts of it are, but Pyongyang is not. I mean, Pyongyang is elite. Okay.
I get it. It was a joke. All right. Well, I'd seen the headlines obviously today about Syria, and it was very troubling to see that. It's even more troubling now that you've explained what's going on and brought us all up to speed. Not good, Denise.
It's not good. Syria used to be even under Bashar al-Assad's father, who was a tyrant, but he's not as bad as his son. But it was a very modern, beautiful place. Damascus was, certainly part of history. Aleppo is part of history. I mean, we all said that Assad must go. But he's still there. I mean, the guy's a war criminal. And I haven't heard any of that come out of Trump's mouth. He is a war criminal. It's beyond dispute. We had the chemical weapons things. They're still actually doing chemical weapons. Chlorine weapons. But nobody wants to talk about it. I watch this stuff every day. It comes across my desk. And, it's kind of like, we want to now talk about Ukraine, or we want to talk about a whistleblower, or we want to talk about impeachment inquiries, or we want to talk blah, 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 blah. The rest of the world's still rolling along. And then today, his cockamamie phone call with Erdogan gets leaked just like, the call that he had with Zelensky of Ukraine.
You got less than a minute. What kind of a penalty could be imposed on the individual that leaked that phone call's information?
Well, I know several others that have gone to prison for at least 3 or 4 years at a minimum.
You just got to wonder whether we're going to see it or not.
Well, what the heck, dude? Go in and take control of your White House. Get that Security Council out.
More.
Lock the place down. What is this man doing?
All right, well, while everybody's thinking about that on the break, ladies and gentlemen, also trot over to Denise's website, founderscode.com. Founders with an S, founderscode.com. You can check out all of her great work. We're going to take a short break, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to the Drive Time Sit Rep with Denise Simon. My name is Don Neuen, and we will be right back.
Check us out on the web at cowboylogic.us.
Welcome back to the Drive Time SITREP, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Don Neuen. I am cascading down I-20, headed westbound. Denise, I'm coming up on the old buddy Douglasville, Chapel Hill Road, exit 36, off of the 20 west. You know where I'm at, don't you?
Pretty much.
It hadn't changed. Actually, all of the construction that I've been fighting for the past 6 months is starting to disappear, and I'm on glassy, smooth Georgia highways right now. So things are pretty good. You remember back about 6 or 8 months ago when all this construction was going on, the background noise on this show was hideous because of the highways. And now they're glassy smooth with all new reflectors. Do you like that?
Oh, kind of like a neon thing.
Very similar, but totally different. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Drive Time SITREP. Denise, where do you want to go from here? I mean, can we?
Well,
you got anything to update us on this faux impeachment thing that's going on?
Well, let me also say what has left the headlines completely when it comes to Trump's actions in foreign power is we still have Maduro in Venezuela now, don't we?
Oh, yeah. Donna and I were actually talking about that this past weekend.
Mm-hmm. So what do we do? A couple of weeks ago, Treasury further targeted some entities in Venezuela, vessels that are moving Venezuelan oil to Cuba. We still have, Cuba issue, so we've got an awful lot of unfinished business here. Now, given the fact that Trump's phone calls are now leaking all over the place, I don't know how he's, I guess that he's going to have just to write out a script and sign it and then hand it over to somebody else like Steve Mnuchin or, Pompeo or somebody else to deliver the phone call because Trump can't talk to world leaders anymore.
Boy, it's amazing how the left wing is doing things that are so damning to our country. So damaging.
I almost really don't know how to describe it. I don't understand. It is so bad that we look like the laughing stock of any kind of advanced country throughout the world today. I would argue,
is this still subversion or is this treason?
Well, I don't like the word treason. I wish everybody quit using it because it's a hanging offense. But the former congressman from Georgia, who I actually have interviewed, who used to be a U.S. attorney, by the way, Bob Barr, was on TV today, and he called these people the right word, and it was saboteurs. And that's really the label. If we're going to apply a label or an action to any of these operatives on the Democrat side, that's precisely the word I think ought to be used. So the people's business is not going to happen. We're not going to come up with any kind of prescription drug legislation. We're not going to repeal and replace Obamacare. We're not going to do any infrastructure. We're not going to deal with any kind of deadly vaping crisis that we have going on with, a dozen or so that have died. Nothing's going to happen. Pelosi is not going to advance the USMCA, which is the trade agreement between the United States, Mexico, and Canada. If I'm not mistaken, I think Canada or Mexico, I forget which one, has already passed theirs. So there's two parties that are still wide open on the thing, and we need to pass it. We're not going to get any further with, I think, any trade agreements because I think China's going to wait us out. I'd just as soon not have a trade agreement with China anyway. Screw them. So I would say all of 2020 is going to look like 2019. That's just not a very positive outlook, is it?
No. And the thing is, you and I, me more than you, have been very vocal about how I am optimistic and hopeful for justice to be served. And, I'm to the point now where I'm saying, well, hey, if we can keep him in for 2020, maybe those next 4 years we can start seeing some justice served.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, all right. I tell you what. Can we move to the report that's supposed to drop on Friday?
Yeah. What about it?
Well, first of all, when I heard that it was going to drop on Friday, I immediately got disillusioned and depressed over that, because if they drop on Fridays, usually that means a big nothing burger. Is there anything hopeful that could come out of this report?
Well, if you hear from a couple of the Republicans on the House side, they said, "Oh, we're all going to be shocked what's in Horowitz's report." Now, the fact that it's being dropped on Friday says that the Department of Justice has already worked through all the redactions and classifications if something has to come out of it or it has to be scratched out or, blanked out or whatever with, the intelligence agencies. And that's fine. I have read several Inspector General's reports, and I'm not impressed with them. They're almost written such that nobody gets into trouble because of how the reports are actually structured. And then they make these recommendations. Okay. Too often we have been disappointed when something comes out. And I think that's necessarily going to happen with this Inspector General's report. I'm happy it's coming out. Okay, cool. I guess I'll spend my weekend reading it. That's okay. But I hope John Radcliffe on the House side, I hope he's right, because he said it'll be shocking. I hope he's right.
That was my next question. Who are the Republicans that are saying that this is going to be shocking?
Well, Ratcliffe was the last one that I heard. Okay. Now, there's a couple others that I think that have alluded to that, Jim Jordan and so forth, and that's okay too. It'll be fascinating because this apparently deals strictly with FISA. All right. And really nothing else. So it'll be interesting to see the genesis of this. However, I would say that the Mueller report in my world was an unfinished report. I'm happy that we got what we got, but we also know, based on the questions when Mueller gave his testimony, that there were too many things that were left unresolved. And I'm not going to blame Mueller, because I don't think that Mueller had really anything. Now that we're really finding out that he was just a figurehead. This was an Andrew Weissman report. I have a feeling that we come away with these disappointments, and I'm almost setting myself up so I'm not disappointed. I'm coming to expect that the Inspector General's report is going to be much the same. But all things FISA, too, are still kind of interesting, because I still believe that, with the snippets that we hear, that is what Durham and AG Barr are still working on as well, the genesis of how all of these things began. So, and the more digging, and I mean, you really do have to do some fascinating digging here, of all of these players, going all the way back to the Manaforts and some of the operatives and the whole Ukraine thing, when the DNC used Ukraine, when Fusion GPS and, the Hillary operation was using some, and the State Department were using some of their connective tissue into Britain, into Italy, into Australia. I think the list of players that we've heard, the list of names that we've heard so far, is probably a deck chair off the Titanic, Don. I think that there's going to be at least 50 more names that are going to be out there. What do you say?
I totally agree with you. As a matter of fact, At one point during the Obama administration reign, I was an enormous fan of one Glenn Beck. And I've kind of moved away from him after he moved away from his chalkboards. You know what I mean when I say that?
Well, let me tell you, interestingly enough, he's gone right back to his chalkboards.
That's why I brought it up.
As a matter of fact, he had an interesting...
Did you watch it?
I did.
Okay, so did I. Ladies and gentlemen, what we're talking about is on Thursday night of last week, or Friday. I think it was Thursday night's show. Glenn Beck did what Glenn Beck does best, and that is stand in front of a chalkboard with magnet photos and timelines, and he lays it all out. And I'm glad you watched that, Denise, because, excuse me, for the listeners, it's much better for them to listen to you than me in my car. Lay that out. If you don't mind, give them a thumbnail sketch of what you and I watched, because I want to ask you where you think the money went.
Which monies?
the like $7 billion.
Well,
but before you go to that, and I want to ask about the woman, I can't remember her name, the Ukrainian ambassador.
Yeah.
Or the ambassador to Ukraine.
Well,
saw her moving around a whole lot on this. But do me a favor, do the listeners a big favor, and kind of regurgitate what Beck talked about. And then we'd encourage you, ladies and gentlemen, go to glennbeck.com and find this, even if you got to subscribe to watch it.
I don't know if I can do justice in describing what Beck shared last week that he deserves and his presentation deserves with all things Ukraine. But another interesting thing and he's put up a lot of relationships, a lot of names that we have not necessarily heard. And the reason this is important is because one component of all things Ukraine goes way beyond the phone call between Trump and Zelensky. It goes back to when the DNC colluded with Ukraine to boost Hillary's campaign. And then all of a sudden, a week before voting, we remember what happened a week before is, all things blew up because of her email server. And so all of that work and lots of monies and conspiracies, and I don't mean conspiracies as something that is, a fake theory. I mean, the choreography of it all was real to help Hillary. They just kind of bailed out and said, well, after what the United States, what the FBI and whatnot did to Hillary, Hillary's not going to win. We now know Trump is going to win, so we're going to have to go all in with Trump. So then the pro-Hillary camp inside Ukraine and inside the State Department and inside the Obama White House just kind of threw up their arms. They knew at that point, it appears, that Trump was going to win, and Ukraine pretty much decided. Remember, Poroshenko left, and he went over. It was Poroshenko. He left, and he went over to Russia, and all kinds of strange things were beginning to happen, including the fact that people were starting to cultivate and share emails that had gone back and forth between the old camp in Ukraine and the DNC. Audios and phone calls and visitor reports and embassies and so forth. So, that part of what Glenn describes, you almost have to watch it 2 or 3 times because I think he almost goes too fast.
But again,
convoluted.
It's very convoluted. And Glenn did a phenomenal job. And I'm telling you, Denise, you and I have talked about this when we weren't doing shows. I studied his work and took meticulous notes back in the day when he was standing in front of those blackboards, those chalkboards, on the Fox News channel and Headline News when he was there.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the first time I've seen the old Glenn Beck in years.
Well, he's actually been doing this on and off for about the last year. And a lot of us have kind of bailed on him because, he kind of went sideways on us for a while and wasn't giving us the arrows in our quiver that we thought we needed from him. So we just kind of bailed on him. But for about the last year or so, he has apparently opened up some channels again that he once had when he did his Glenn Beck show at 5 to 6 that we all stopped everything we were doing to watch him. And some of those channels have opened up and some very interesting things have come to him, such that he's gone back to his pictures and his chalkboard and the names of the companies and the emails and so forth and so on. So the point of this is he's almost like the countermeasure now. He's kind of a sideline war room that I think somebody in the Trump White House ought to be paying attention to. And maybe they are, but when I was in D.C. a week and a half ago, I asked an awful lot of people that were connected to the re-election campaign for Trump, not on radio, but in, just sideline conversations. And I said, is there a war room? And they're all going, yeah, there's a war room. Of course there is. And I said, well, I'm not seeing it. And, then I start looking at what those are saying, like at the Wall Street Journal, that are necessarily on his side, the American Enterprise, several other Heritage. And they all said there's not a war room. And there absolutely needs to be. Hence the reason I started off this SITREP with you, this drive time SITREP with you, by saying the man needs to clear his National Security Council at the White House and go put him over at the Trump Hotel for a week or two.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? He needs to start ruling with an iron fist.
Go back to the Glenn Beck special. Now, again, ladies and gentlemen, I know you can find out about this by going to glennbeck.com.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's a subscriber-only video.
No, he has actually posted them on his Facebook page. And I think
so they're free to watch.
Yes, and Ben Shapiro has picked them up over on Daily Wire. So these most recent ones, and this recording that they were able to get, it says here the Blaze has released an audio recording that they recently obtained that appears to show Artem Sinnik, director of the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine.
Okay. Yep. Stop
admitting
right there. That was huge.
Yeah.
That recording. Yep. Please, I'll be quiet.
And he admits that he tried to boost the presidential campaign of Hillary Clinton by sabotaging candidate Trump.
Yep.
And the person that was the go-between in all of this was a Democratic operative by the name of Alexandra Chalupa, who, by the way, worked in the Clinton White House, in the Office of Public Liaison. She was a consultant to the DNC, and she worked directly in the Ukraine embassy in the United States. She was the one that was the point person to get all the dirt that she possibly could on Rick Gates and Paul Manafort. Now, we know that the embassy in Washington, the Ukraine embassy in Washington, D.C., was called to the Obama White House off the record and not on logging in on any kind of visitors logs. And this was all coordinated by little Miss Chalupa, who communicated also with a person by the name of Louise Miranda at the Democratic National Committee. Yeah, it's very...
Well, listen, clearly the writing's on the wall. As you said earlier, this is highly convoluted. And you're right. In order to fully absorb what's going on with Glenn Beck's presentation, which, again, GlennBeck.com, ladies and gentlemen. Go check it out.
It was a 2-hour special that Glenn Beck did.
You know, and I kept, for about the first 30 minutes, I'm going, oh, come on, Glenn, get with it here. You know, because the first 20 or 30 minutes of this was, quite honestly, rather slow. And I'm glad I hung with it, because once he walked up to the chalkboards, that's when it got extraordinarily fascinating.
Well, the other thing is
the names that you and I have been talking about, we've been reading about, they all start coming up.
Well, this Sytnyk person, I guess that's how you say it, Sytnyk.
Don't feel bad. Glenn couldn't say it either.
Anyway, he's actually got convicted in the highest court in the land in Ukraine. So, because of tampering. Now, that didn't happen under Poroshenko. So, now we have to wonder how many people Giuliani has actually had discussions with. Well, we could find out, because what has Congress done? They have now subpoenaed all of Giuliani's stuff. And now, interestingly enough, they've actually gone over the Department of Defense and subpoenaed documents of the Department of Defense.
Well, you got to ask yourself, is this stuff that the Democrats really want to uncover?
It doesn't matter. They're not trying to do any of this. This is all a charade between... Look, Pelosi, when she opened up her... was it 2 weeks ago now? When she opened up her impeachment inquiry thing to all of the committees, germane committees in the House, she was essentially taking it away from Jerry Nadler. And she's handing it over to Schiff. Okay? Now, and the Republicans have figured this out. That's why they're so heavily criticizing Schiff and not Nadler. But impeachment has to happen in the judiciary. So that's why we're not going to that's why she's not bringing anything to a vote, because she hasn't followed any procedure.
Right.
So I would say don't fret on this one yet, at all. This is all a charade. And they say that, they're going to be finished with all this and blah, 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 blah by Thanksgiving. No, they're not. No, they're not.
Well, the thing is, you're seeing the word subpoenaed fly around.
That's just warfare. That's just paper warfare.
Well, none of this. There are no subpoenas.
They may have in fact subpoenaed Giuliani in the Department of Defense. As for the others, I think they were just letters. They weren't formal subpoenas.
Okay. Well, we'll see about Giuliani in the Department of Defense. Why do you think they're going to the Department of Defense?
Well, because they want to see if there really was a quid pro quo where Trump was holding back Javelin missiles to Ukraine, when in fact, here's the deal. It wasn't equipment that we were graciously giving them on a generous grant. No, Ukraine bought them. And they've been sitting in Europe all this time. And I think as of Friday, they got back on a train, or the train's engine started again, and they were heading to Ukraine. The train to Ukraine. God.
And you're a poet and didn't know it.
I can't. Here's the thing. Somebody asked me, Denise, are you writing about all this? I can't. You can't possibly write about it. Whatever I write today in 10 minutes, it's outdated.
No, I know. Here's the thing. Ladies and gentlemen, bring yourself up to speed. Go check out the Glenn Beck video from Thursday night. I think it's titled Ukraine.
Yeah, I think so too. I almost want to say, welcome back, Glenn.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear that he's been doing this kind of stuff for the past year.
He has.
I wrote him off. I really did.
A lot of people did.
I got tired of his little creepy. I felt like he needed to be hanging out with that woman that was running the on the Democrat ticket. What's her name?
Marianne, whatever.
Yeah, like the two of them ought to hang out together. I mean, it just kind of creeped me out at times. But I did see the old Glenn Beck a little heavier. He put on some pounds in an ill-fitting vest. But you know what? He spoke the gospel, and it was the old Glenn Beck, and I was very happy. The thing is, just like you said, you got to watch it a couple of times.
You really do, and you do have to have a piece of paper and a pencil, for sure, and in order to begin to at least remember names. I think when you write them, you remember them a little bit better, and then start looking at some connective tissue between all of these factions. Maybe the Friday report will help us some more, but that's kind of a different twist to this whole thing. But I'll go back to Bob Barr, former congressman. These are saboteurs, and he's precisely right on that one.
Well, I got to tell you something else, Denise, and I don't know whether you listen as frequently as I do to Dan Bongino's show, but I do not miss an episode. I listen to every one of them. Sometimes I got to catch two of them in a day to catch up, but I listen to every one of them, and you can find them at Bongino.com. I can tell you this. I was familiar with everyone that Glenn Beck talked about, except the one guy that was in charge of the corruption organization, the anti-corruption organization. Mm-hmm. Everybody else I was familiar with. And I was familiar with them primarily because Dan Bongino, in typical Dan Bongino style, beats it into my frontal lobe over a course of 56 minutes. Mm-hmm. So, at any rate, Bongino.com, ladies and gentlemen, GlennBeck.com, FoundersCode.com. And if you want to look at me, go to CowboyLogic.us. Denise, another stellar job on this week's Drive Time. It's time to take it home. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Denise, get us out of here.
Thanks for listening, ladies and gentlemen. God bless America.
Check us out on the web at cowboylogic.us.